Welcome, everybody. My name is Erich Reed, and I'm the director of the Southwest Harbor Public Library. Tonight's event is a collaboration with the Mount Desert Historical Society. Assistant Director Lisa Taplin Murray will introduce tonight's speaker. Lisa coordinates MDHS's programs. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Erich. I'm just trying to get back to my notes here. Thank you, and thank you all of you for joining us tonight. My name is Lisa Murray, and I am the Assistant Director and the Program Coordinator at the MDI Historical Society. I also want to have a big thank you to everybody at the Southwest Harbor Public Library for collaborating with us on our 2024 speaker series. I think this is our second or third. Actually, it might be even our fourth event with you. And so this is our last program of the year, featuring authors of articles from the 2024 edition of our history journal, Chebacco. And our 2025 edition is starting to come together. The theme is food, and it will arrive in members' mailboxes in May. So keep your eyes open for that. We have two programs remaining on our fall schedule. On Tuesday, October 22nd at 5 p.m., our History Happy Hour will return with a free tour of Bar Harbor's Ledgelawn Cemetery, and we will gather afterwards for food and a brief trivia game at Atlantic Midtown. And then our History Book Club will return on October 28th at 6 p.m. on Zoom, and we will be discussing The Real James Bond by Jim Wright. And if you'd like any more information on both of these events, and including how to register, feel free to go to our website at mdihistory.org/events, and I will also put a link to that in our chat. So tonight I am pleased to welcome Jenna Jandreau, author of Learning from LaRue, which was published in the 2024 edition of Chebacco, talking about LaRue Spiker's prolific writing and photography in the area and the impact both her creativity and conscience had on the people and places of Mount Desert Island. LaRue, prominent among the who's who of Mount Desert Island, was a freelance writer, photographer, journalist, and editor of the Bar Harbor Times in the early 1960s. Those who remember her describe her as no-nonsense and intelligent. Not only did she receive frequent kudos in the letters to the editor, but also many criticisms for her opinions she expressed in her editorials and articles. Having moved to the area from away, Spiker brought a fresh lens to the island, capturing its natural beauty in her photographs and numerous people from many different walks of life. She seemed to have an insatiable curiosity about everything MDI, writing about sea urchins, lady slippers, and ferns, along with feature articles on fishing villages, local artists and writers, and political issues such as nuclear disarmament and the consolidation of MDI high schools. Jenna is a freelance writer and photographer who lives in northern Maine's St. John Valley. She is the founder and co-chair of Rivertown Community Arts Center in Fort Kent, Maine. She was the collections manager at MDI Historical Society in 2018 and the communications coordinator from 2022 to 2023. Her writing and photography have appeared in the Maine Townsman, Off the Coast, Strut and Axle, Chebacco, and other publications. So I welcome you, Jenna, tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. It is a real joy to be speaking this evening about LaRue and to see some familiar faces pop up among the guest list. And so I thank you all for coming this evening to hear about this really incredible woman. A little bit of background about starting this article. I was asked by the executive director of the MDI Historical Society, Rainey Bench, to write about LaRue for the edition of Chebacco that was going to be about how people were influenced by or influenced MDI. And I was already very kind of taken with the biography I had heard of LaRue already, and only became more and more so as I did research on her. So I was paired with Carl Little as my editor for writing this Chebacco article, and it was a real pleasure working with him. The thing about LaRue is that she had quite a life, and there was both a political history and a writing history, and I didn't quite know where to start and where to focus my essay, I guess, on her. And so I sent a few ideas to Carl and asked him if he had any opinions on what I might want to cover in my article. And because there had been some scholarship and writing done about her political activism, one of my topics was her writing. And so he thought that that might be a good focus for my article, and I was very happy for that to be my focus. So I, for this Chebacco article, really looked at her career as a freelance writer and as a reporter. I do know a little bit about her political activism, and I did see that Carolyn Gage is on in this meeting as well. She knows a lot about LaRue's political activism, and so if there are any questions that are sent my way that I can't answer about that, we might have somebody that would know the answer to that. So I do want to say thank you to Carl, who's also on this meeting, for working with me on this article and really fine-tuning it and pointing me in this direction. And I also want to thank the MDI Historical Society for giving me the opportunity to share this part of LaRue's story, and also for doing the good work of taking care of LaRue Spiker's collection. In the collection room at the schoolhouse, the Sound Schoolhouse, there are approximately 5,300 items related to LaRue Spiker and from her collection. It ranges from her manuscripts, her articles, to photographs, negatives, slides, and then physical objects like her cameras, her typewriter, her light meter. So when I was working as the collections coordinator at the MDI Historical Society, I was so interested in these big boxes of things that said, you know, League of Women Voters, and there's just all kinds of ephemera in there, and then opening up a slide box and just holding up to the window all of these beautiful images of MDI nature. And as a freelance photographer and writer myself, I had a lot of affinity to her nature photography, and many of the things that she found beautiful speak to a lot of us. And so tonight, as I talk a little bit about her career as a writer, I will also be sharing a lot of her photographs. And I could have filled the whole edition of Chebacco with her photographs, but they do give us a page limit. And so they included as many as they could, but I had many more waiting in the wings that I'm happy to share with you tonight. So you will see all of these images have this watermark of Mount Desert Island Historical Society, and that's because they are all in their collection. So LaRue Spiker pictured here in 1959. I wish that I could have found a photograph of myself in 2019, 60 years after this photo was taken. I attempted to recreate LaRue's look for a Halloween costume. We had a history happy hour at Peter Trout's in Manset, and I wanted to dress up as LaRue Spiker for Halloween. So I found some thick-rimmed black glasses like she's wearing, and I popped the lenses out because I got them at Goodwill and they were a prescription that was not mine. And I wore a really heavy kind of canvas vest that had lots of pockets. And since I had also been a community reporter years before, I still had some of those thin reporter journalist notebooks where you can flip the pages and write a bunch of notes when you're trying to scribble people's quotes down. So I brought that, and I created a lanyard and badge that said LaRue Spiker Bar Harbor Times on it, and attended the history happy hour of 2019. And Lisa mentioned at the beginning of this event that there is going to be a history happy hour again in October, and that'll be 5 years since that night. So time really did fly. So I did not include a cigarette in my hand as part of the props, but LaRue was known for being always smoking a cigarette. As I mentioned in my article, I will only go so far for a costume. So LaRue was born in 1912 in Illinois, and she attended the University of Minnesota and then got her master's from the University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration. So she was educated as a social worker, and it speaks to the fact that she cared deeply about people and justice. She met her partner, Louise Gilbert, while she was at university, and they lived next to each other after LaRue moved to MDI, but that was, I believe, the closest that they lived next to each other. When they met in university, I think they were just friends at first, but they were in each other's lives until the end of their lives. So just to go into a little bit of her background before she came to the island. In 1950, she would have been around 37, 38 years old. She was canvassing in support of nuclear disarmament with another woman who worked with her at the Indiana Department of Welfare. And while they were canvassing, they were stopped by police and they were reported for their political activism. They were fired by the Indiana Department of Welfare for, quote, aiding and abetting the Civil Rights Congress, a group listed by the U.S. Attorney General as an organization of subversive nature, end quote. They were supposedly tied to communist groups and things like that, so they had made that list. After she was fired from that job, she ended up moving to Louisville, Kentucky, and worked for 3 years in a flour mill there. She found that her conscience was very strong against racial injustice, and in one instance, she was arrested and charged with sedition. This story is really it's high drama, even though it's fact. There was a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Wade, who were a Black couple that wanted to buy a home in Louisville, Kentucky. And They could not get a mortgage to purchase a home, and they could not find a neighborhood that was willing to sell them a home where they wanted. And so they asked a white couple, the Bragdons, if they would buy a home. They would give them the money and they would buy the home in their name. And that is exactly what happened. And the neighborhood and town, city did not respond well at all to that action. The Wades dealt with a rock being thrown through their window with a really awful message note wrapped around it. There were shots fired at their house. A cross was burned in the lot next door to their house. And so LaRue and Louise Gilbert were part of a small group of volunteers that stood guard outside the Wades' home and tried to keep more physical destruction from happening and to provide a little bit of safety for them. Unfortunately, the house was damaged by an explosion, a bomb, a dynamite bomb was put under the floor and exploded. And so at that time, a grand jury investigated the incident and believed that it was a communist plot to acquire that house, was an attempt to cause division in the community and bring things to a head. And also even that the explosion was staged by those that were supposedly trying to protect the Wades. There was a lot of the volunteers that were arrested and charged with sedition, including LaRue and Louise Gilbert. They charged one of the other volunteers with placing the bomb. The charges were eventually, and also the Bragdons for buying the house. The charges were eventually dropped and reversed. They were dismissed in 1956. Carolyn Gage has written or spoken about how there was a significant part of the whole thing about calling them communists and asking them to make statements was that they were attacking her sexuality and her relationship with Louise Gilbert. So that was definitely a part of the whole trying conflict that LaRue was dealing with in that situation. So after that time, she decided to take to the road and do some traveling. And her freelance career really began at this stage. She had been taking photos for many years. There are photographs in the MDI Historical Society's collection that are from Indiana when she was still there. But she began writing in the late 50s. And she wrote for a lot of travel kind of magazines, one being Trailer Topics. And she visited MDI for the first time in 1957. And she liked to camp. And so she was in a camper. She camped near Bar Harbor. And she ended up writing in Trailer Topics. And I'm going to quote her here. The fishing villages with their enormous elms and cleanly kept old houses were of a world I had known only in picture books. It was hard to go on through them, but I had decided, more or less at random, to try Bar Harbor for the rest of the summer. It is a choice in which I shall always rejoice. End quote. So I'm going to move on from this slide here. We'll see her near her camper. This is in Juniper Springs in March 1959. So a little bit later than that quote just read you, but she is in travel mode. And she is also with one of her dogs. She was known for her love of dogs. The volunteer, Jennifer Heindel, who digitized the lion's share, if not all, of LaRue Spiker's collection at MDI Historical Society, did the tedious work of digitizing probably hundreds of photos of dogs. But we see LaRue here pictured with one of them. I believe it's a Cocker Spaniel. She liked Cocker Spaniels. In 1958, she came back to the MDI region after traveling for a year, and she pitched to the Bar Harbor Times editor, Charles Shea, writing 3 or 4 articles on natural history. And he said, of the island, and he said, go ahead and write them, and if I like them, I'll publish them. He loved them, and he published them all. And he is quoted as saying that he never rejected a LaRue Spiker story after. She moved to Southwest Harbor in 1959 and built herself a log cabin, and then became a feature writer for the Bar Harbor Times. So I did a lot of research on the newspaper archive.com, local newspapers, the Bar Harbor Times, and I think the Bar Harbor Record are available through the History Trust. And I was able to see up until the mid-60s, a lot of her articles there. And I looked through every edition from when she started until when they go up to digitizing. I think it's 1964. So even though she was a feature writer for the Bar Harbor Times, she also continued her travel writing. She contributed to Trailer Topics, Frontiers, and Trailer Travel, all while writing features for the Bar Harbor Times. Here is a photograph of one of her cameras, a Minolta, and I also have a couple of Minoltas in an antique camera collection. So when I dressed up as LaRue for Halloween, I put a Minolta around my neck as one of my props. It looks almost exactly like that one. She also wrote about Mount Desert Island and its residents for national publications, such as Nation and Dodge News. In 1962, the New England Press Association gave Spiker an award for her essay, I Came to This Place, which appeared in a special section of the Bar Harbor Times in August of 1961. Commemorating the bicentennial of the arrival of the first white settlers to Mount Desert Island, Spiker authored all of the articles in the section, having researched the topic for 2 years. So there were quite a few letters that were written into the Bar Harbor Times, referencing LaRue's writing and reporting. There were some that were in support and some that were against what she wrote about. Not necessarily her natural history type of articles, but more about when she covered some controversial topics or expressed anything political. Connie Robertson Fisher wrote, I think your LaRue Spiker must be a remarkable person. Who is she? Only an islander, or one who has adopted the island and spends many hours in research, could write with so much knowledge and understanding. She certainly deserves much credit and praise. Shea, the editor, responded, Miss Spiker is a Midwesterner who adopted Mount Desert Island 4 years ago. She now lives at Southwest Harbor, does much of her writing at home, commutes to the Times office each Tuesday and Wednesday, and has every intention of remaining a citizen of MDI. which she did. She lived on MDI until she passed away. So I'm going to take the opportunity now to do a little bit of a photo montage. I don't have any great music to play during it, but I'm going to go through a series of photos of people. When you're a community reporter, I know this from experience, you find yourself in a lot of places you never would have expected yourself to be. You meet people from all walks of life. You learn all kinds of interesting stories. And so LaRue certainly had a great talent for finding stories of interest and people of interest, whether they were well-known or whether they were kind of under the radar in the community. So, oh, here's a couple of landscape shots first. So this is Somme Sound and the cliffs at Valley Cove. And I don't have the date for this photo, but if I do have the dates, I will include them on the slide. And I did have to include these for the sake of, this is the MDI Historical Society's museum, where it's near the wonderful bridge and the little selectmen's building. So this is a photo in their collection, and it has new museum written on the back. So this was taken in 1981 when that museum was built. And then this is a picture, presumably also from 1981, of the selectmen's building. She covered that story for the Bar Harbor Times. And then we have a really interestingly composed photo of some buoys and lobster traps. Now begins the section of people that I was referencing earlier. This is Louise Gilbert, LaRue's partner, and this was taken around 1970. Erich mentioned Wendell Gilly Museum program earlier in this event, and this is Wendell Gilly around 1980. I believe he passed away in 81. So he's at work carving one of his beautiful birds, wearing a very Maine vest, if I might add, the quilted vest. We have Ashley Bryan working on a painting. She interviewed Ashley twice during her years at the Bar Harbor Times. I don't know the date because it was after 1964 and I couldn't find the date on this. I'd say he's probably like maybe 60, 70 in this photo. And he passed away only recently at 99 years old, maybe. This was Kay Higgins. She was a fisherwoman who also was a poet. She is sitting on the porch at her home looking at a copy of Down East magazine. This is in 1970. She has this brilliant gull brooch or pin on her shirt. Here we have Ted Sperling. He was a lobsterman who used to do a lot of these decorative Turk's heads, they're called. So in the caption, it says that they were used as decorative collars on sailing vessels. They were a popular gift shop item and used as candlestick holders. Ted was part of the Oceanarium team, and this was taken in 1967. This is Davis Grimm or Irvin. There are two copies of this photograph, and it looks like it's hard to tell from the writing on the back, I tried to locate this individual to confirm the last name, and I had no luck there. So if anybody recognizes this person, please put in the chat whether it's Grimm or Irvin. This was in the 1980s, and Davis is pictured here with a canoe that he built himself. And so these portraits are really, they do a lot of storytelling all on their own. And she happened to be an amazing writer that paired these beautiful photographs with some great articles. This is Wynne Ellis working on a boat as well. Ralph Stanley in 1973. He's pictured here with one of his models, boat models. He's a dapper young man. Arthur Sperling in the 1980s. He's also working with a half kind of dissected half model. She went out to Islesford and did profiles of individuals out there as well. Wilfred Bunker in the 1980s. Robert Lincoln, founder of RKL Boatworks in Mount Desert. Here he's working on a boat, 1976. Another photo of him here. This was a photo taken at the Farnsworth Boatyard in the 60s. LaRue did a profile of the Farnsworth family, a boat building family. Here are Judith and Pamela Farnsworth watching their father working. I see in the chat, Dave Irvin. So it is Irvin. It's not Irwin. It's not Grimm. It's Irvin. Okay. Thank you so much. And that's referring to this, we're going back, we're traveling, we're time traveling. This man, Davis Irvin. Thank you. That was Betsy, John and Betsy Hewitt, who chimed in his name. Okay, hold on to your hats. We're going to time travel again. This is a photo of College of the Atlantic students. The photo does not have a caption, like any info written on the back, but the MDI Historical Society posted it on their Facebook page years ago and asked if anybody could identify who was in the photo, and these were the names that were commented. I love this photograph. I think it just, it tells so many, it just, I don't know, there's just something amazing about it. This is at some kind of town event, you know, maybe the Hayseeders Ball or something like that. Ron Beard is pictured here. He's second from the left. Another one of my favorite of her photos. This on the back is marked Southwest Harbor. I call this boots in booths. And so there's presumably some lobstermen that are exercising their civic right to vote. This is Chong and Judy Lim holding engraved plants, not plants, plates, near a printing press in the 1970s. They started, there's a typo there, sorry about that. They started Island Designs on Great Cranberry in 1978, and then later moved to Bar Harbor and then Scarborough. And they are still operating today. Here we have Anne Wells, pictured on the right, and Susie Stebbins Ward, pictured on the left. Anne is on this call. Hello, Anne. When I asked her to identify who the woman on the left was, she gave me her name, and then she also noted she was my first trainee who tutored local students under my direction during the school year. The van was my car, which I used as a mobile tutoring van, servicing students at Camp Beechcliff and around MDI. Our nonprofit was called Learning Incorporated. I love that name. Here's LaRue pictured. Someone took this photograph of her, and then she took the photograph of them after. And in addition to her face, what I particularly love is that this photo is a little blurry, and then the one that she took of someone else is crystal clear. So it just goes to show the skill needed to use a film camera sometimes and focus it properly. So she was writing for the Bar Harbor Times. Charles Shea was her editor, but he passed away in 1962. And the Bar Harbor Times hired LaRue as its editor. She continued to write articles and essays, and she also authored the weekly editorial Talk of the Times. Not one to shy away from expressing her political opinion, she used her editorial platform to write about both local and national concerns, such as the consolidation of MDI's high schools, freedom of the press, nuclear armament, the dangers of pesticides, and a lot more. In one Talk of the Times, Spiker wrote, "We seem to be in serious danger of becoming a nation of people who are more impressed by flash and thunder than by a careful weighing of values." LaRue was only the editor of the Bar Harbor Times for 2 years. She resigned in 1964. She wrote to a friend, "I resigned for a number of important policy differences with the publisher, which I had tried unsuccessfully over a period of months to resolve. The situation got progressively worse instead of better until I felt I was so boxed in that I could do nothing but a hack job. Life is too short, and an editor's job too demanding to sit still for that." So after she resigned, she continued to write some feature articles for the Times, and then she really threw herself back into the world of freelance writing. She also advertised photography services in the classifieds, custom photography, parties, picnics, special events, informal portraiture. She sometimes editorialized while she was writing her articles for the Bar Harbor Times. Her articles still drew some negative attention, especially during the Vietnam War, because she was not in support of the US being a part of that conflict. Some members of the community labeled her as a communist, a socialist, and unpatriotic. She did not let this kind of behavior impede her career. Her writing remained vibrant, clever, and insightful. She had a weekly column, "Don't Bother Me with Facts," which she began writing in July 1965. An article in the July 1 edition of the Bar Harbor Times titled "Times to Publish Commentary Column" announced, quote, "In next week's Times, we will introduce a unique weekly column by LaRue Spiker on local and sometimes state and national affairs that are relevant to Times readers. The column will reflect the author's opinion on the topics with which she deals. It will be unique in that space will be allotted within the column each week for comments to Miss Spiker from readers regarding the subjects covered by her in previous columns. So the Bar Harbor Times was willing to publish a dialogue between LaRue Spiker and the MDI community. Quote, "It is hoped that the column represents a forum for our readers to present their opinions on important issues. Miss Spiker does not guarantee that her opinions will always be popular ones." End quote. Later that month, Spiker explained her choice for the column's title, "Don't Bother Me with Facts." Quote, "The clause is the punchline in a story with which disillusioned reporters bless the sorry mess the American press has created for itself. By and large, the press has become the call girl of the American political scene. She entertains. She answers the command of the powers who wish to use her. And her mink coat does not quite hide the extent of her corruption, though she buttons it tightly against the chill of truth." End quote. Just from that, you can see what an incredible writer she was. Her column had the desired effect. Community members wrote in, both agreeing and disagreeing with her on issues such as local and state taxes, deer management on the islands. I had to chuckle when I found that. Some things are all still issues. Roadside billboards, high school consolidation, the state of local roads, the Vietnam War, etc. Her historical research ranged freely. She wrote articles and features about the mansions of Mount Desert, horse racing in Bar Harbor. She wrote those two articles for Down East magazine. She profiled local people, also in Down East, such as a Maine lady and her model ships. She wrote about 2 beekeepers who lived on the Crooked Road, 4 local harbor masters, extensive profiles on Ted Sperling and Arthur Sperling. She wrote about the old sawmill that was then operating in Soamesville as of 1974 and was operated by Blaine Haynes and his sons Terry and Stephen of the Granite Museum. In 1977, she profiled Catherine Higgins. I showed you a picture of her earlier wearing that beautiful gull brooch, a fisherwoman who, quote, "relieves drudgery of the fishing life by writing poetry." Spiker wrote about the fire of 1922, a much lesser known fire than the fire of 1947, which she also wrote about. She wrote about the island of Frenchboro and its people, mid-century changes to Swan's Island. She wrote a profile of the fishing family, the Farnsworths, that were in Hull's Cove. Her topics included the history of Steuben, the history of Gott's Island, the birth of Mount Katahdin, post offices of MDI, ships and schooners of MDI, the biome of MDI, the Seal Cove Auto Museum, history of the Acadians, and women's suffrage. I asked a few of my friends and people in my circle from MDI if they knew or remembered LaRue, and Ann Wells wrote, "When I hear her name, I think of someone who stood for what she believed in and brought important points to the surface for people to think about." End quote. One of those important points that she brought to the surface was the environmental degradation of the Bass Harbor Marsh. In the summer of 1989, LaRue learned that the transfer station was running off or directly putting its waste in the Bass Harbor Marsh, and it was causing blooms that were destroying the ecosystem. And she worked for years on making sure that that problem was remedied until it was. She passed away in November of 1995 at the age of 83. And just like I did the kind of montage of who's who people, only a small selection of the people that she photographed, I also have done a collection of her nature photos. Again, the smallest smidge of a percentage of what's in the collection. But it's truly stunning what she captured with her camera. This is the Bass Harbor Marsh, which she worked tirelessly to preserve. A very familiar view when you're crossing over the little bridge. Here she photographed some cormorants nesting on Ship Island, and I think it would be interesting to find out if that still happens. You do see sometimes that large bird populations no longer nest in the same areas that they used to. Fiddlehead ferns. She even went macro with some of her photographs. Bunchberry, still commonly seen all over the island. This is from a box in the collection labeled Wild Gardens of Acadia. This is from a box labeled Spring 1976 Nature. A Luna moth. This photo here is of LaRue during the Bar Harbor 4th of July parade. She's 68 years old and she is walking in the parade, passing out League of Women's Voters statements on acid rain and the sin fuel bill. This is the last photo I have in the slideshow. And this is her dressed all in white, oar in hand, paddling, not sure where, maybe Seal Cove Pond. She passed away in 1995, a year after her partner, Louise Gilbert, passed away in 1994. I did a lot of research through reading lots of newspapers, looking through the MDI Historical Society's their collection online, looking at everything that they had digitized, reading a lot of her writing. She wrote letters to the editor before she was a reporter. She was writing in, supporting families, whether they were Philippine families that were trying to establish in a town. Nobody was welcoming them. She wrote in support of them being able to buy real estate. She wrote columns, articles, essays, short stories, poetry. She wrote a novel that was never published, The Mantle of Elijah, which was the fictionalized account of Elijah Lovejoy, who was killed while fighting off people that were destroying his printing press because he was an abolitionist. And she wanted to tell his story. It was never picked up, even though she tried for years for it to be published. I haven't read it yet. The entire manuscript is in the MDI Historical Society's collection. I also referenced Elizabeth Redhead's article in one of the early editions of Chebacco. Then I read and watched some of Carolyn Gage's writing and presentations on her and Louise Gilbert's political activism. So that is the end of my slideshow, and I am open to questions, hoping I can answer.
Yeah, so anyone that has a question, you're welcome to use the chat feature, or you can also raise your hand. Okay, we got Susan Buell. Go ahead, please, Susan. You'll have to unmute yourself.
There we are. Is that good? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, this has been extraordinary, and seeing all these people and learning more about LaRue. Do you know where her house was, her log cabin that she built, as you say, in Southwest Harbor? Does anybody know where that was? I assume it's still around, still present.
I am not sure exactly where it is, but she left it in an easement. When she passed away, it was preserved, and I believe it's still preserved land. It's not developed now. I think it's across the entrance to the dump. So like Salem
Mhm.
Woods Road
Yeah.
area.
Okay.
That's what
Thank you.
somebody wrote, Carolyn Gage, and she knows a lot about LaRue. So yeah, that'd be cool. I think it's Long Pond Road. Okay.
Thank
That's the dump road. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Thank you.
that the dump is off of. You're welcome. And I did see somebody said that Ron Beard was on the far right of that photo.
Yeah.
Thank you if I'm incorrect on that,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I identified it. She wrote Ron Beard on the back of the photo. That was the only name she identified. And I found a picture of Ron online, and I compared noses, and apparently I didn't match noses correctly. So thank you for that correction. Any other questions about LaRue? It's really wonderful to see some familiar faces among the participants. Oh, MDI History is raising its hand. The logo would like to speak.
That was an accident. I apologize.
Oh, it's okay, Lisa. Well, okay, is there a collection of Kate Higgins poetry? Not that I know of, Carl. I didn't find anything when I searched for her. I couldn't even find a copy of a poem locally or on the internet. And Carl also mentioned that Kobe College awards the Elijah Lovejoy Prize every year to a journalist. That is awesome. That is very cool. Somebody asked her why she didn't write a biography of him, and she said she thought that people would be more inclined to read a fictionalized account, that they were looking for that kind of thing. So I thought that was interesting. I look forward to reading that someday. Bill Horner says, so good to see you and hear you. Thanks, Bill. It's nice to see you too. Oh, awesome. So Julie Fernald, I believe, says that she has a copy of Kate Higgins's poetry, and the illustrations were done by Christine Gilly. The Christine that has photos at the meeting house, the Manset meeting house? Same Christine? Or no? We'll wait. Let's see if she answers that. So yes, Carl, I guess there is yep, same Christine Gilly. Small world. I think that Christine Gilly is also the one that lives in Ruth Moore's old house on Gott's Island in the summer. All comes around.
That is actually Christina Gillis.
Oh, the one that lives on.
Yeah, Christina
Okay,
and
so
John Gillis. Yeah.
got it. So Christine Gilly does have the photos at the Manset meeting house, but it's not the same as the Christine that lives out on Gott's. Says our resident Gotts Island expert, Lisa Chaplin Murray. It takes a village. Well, Carl, Jenna, can you tell us about what you're up to in the county? I would love to, because I have recently opened, I founded and am the co-chair of Rivertown Community Arts Center, which is on Main Street, downtown Fort Kent. We are over 100 members strong already, and we've only been open for a week. I had a homeschool program yesterday with there were 27 kids there. Tonight they're doing a clay program that I am not able to attend because I'm here with you all. And we have creative programming, well-stocked art studios for kids and adults, and gathering and meeting space, which is all three things were lacking in Fort Kent before this organization got started. And I am happy that I have artsy moms and a literary dad and UMFK professors and the high school art teacher, elementary school professors, all of that. I have a great board. And so I'm really excited to be working on this now. When I left the MDI Historical Society, it was last year. It was my goal to get this started, and so it is now, which makes me really, really happy.
Congratulations.
I did see that Kate Pickup says that the library has copies of Kate's book of poetry, and it's called Poems on the Way Home. What a beautiful title. Thank you, Carolyn, for coming.
Can I just say one more thing? There's a bench at Harbor House outside that's dedicated to LaRue Spiker. I don't know who was behind putting that bench up, or I would imagine it'd be several people, but I don't know who they are. And why particularly the bench is at Harbor House, I don't know why about that either, but it is there and it's for people to sit on. And just to point that out.
Yes, as far as I know, it was the town that had that put in, and it says on it in honor of everything she's done for the town, which I find really, really very lovely. Thank you for mentioning that. So I did write a little more extensively about what I talked about tonight in the 2024 edition of Chebacco. And there are some other great resources available through Chebacco, and then Carolyn Gage's scholarship on LaRue and her impact on the area.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you so much, Jenna. This has been wonderful. We really appreciate it. And congratulations on your new endeavor. That's really exciting.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone that came out. Hello, Nancy, my fellow county girl. It was a real pleasure to be with you all this evening.
Good.
Nice to see you, Jenna.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks, Jenna.
program.
Thanks for a great program.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jenna.
There's that Bill Horner voice. Oh, it's so good to hear.
Great. You look great. It's so good to see you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I miss you, Bill. I hope to see you soon.
I hope so too. I really do. All the best to you, Jenna.
You too. Thank you.